A lot of us haven't yet gotten started on this year's tax returns. Governor Maura Healey is proposing a $742 million package of tax cuts that could lower what you owe next year. Now, earlier today at a YMCA in Lowell, Healey argued her plan is necessary to help taxpayers stay afloat amid rising inflation.
Everywhere we go, the lieutenant governor and I hear about the cost of living and how it's impacting communities, how it's skyrocketing past people. The young mom who wants to return to her dream job but can't afford childcare. The recent college grad who can't make both his rent and his student loan payments. The senior who wants to stay in the home where they raise their family but can't keep up with property taxes. The small business owner contemplating moving to another state that has less burdensome taxes.
Now, the bulk of this proposal, $458 million worth, is a child and family tax credit that would affect more than 700,000 taxpayers. It would credit families $600 each for dependents with disabilities, children under 13, and senior dependents age 65 and up. Healey's plan is similar to a nearly $700 million tax package proposed last year by Governor Charlie Baker. This would also increase the state's rental deduction from $3,000 to $4,000. Healey's plan uses tax credits to eliminate the estate tax for estates valued up to $3 million. It cuts the tax rate on short-term capital gains, expands the apprenticeship tax credit program, and raises the cap on housing development incentive program credits, and that's just part of what's in this. Joining me to discuss it are Evan Horowitz, Executive Director of the Center for State Policy Studies at Tufts University, and GBH News State House reporter Katie Lannon. Welcome to you both. Katie, I want to start with you. A lot of these proposals, tax credits for people who care for kids, seniors, and disabled adults, increase in rental deductions, these are not really controversial in Beacon Hill. They've drawn strong legislative support in the past. But the governor's proposals to reduce estate and capital gains tax rates are likely to be controversial. What's the immediate fallout on Beacon Hill?
Yeah, it was really interesting because right away we saw the conservative Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance praising Healey for including these, and the Raise Up Massachusetts coalition that helped pass the new millionaires tax knock her for it, which is not usually how a Democrat's actions are responded to on Beacon Hill. The legislature, we really haven't seen them play their hand yet on this. Top Democrats, House Speaker Rahm Mariano and Senate President Karen Spilka, are saying that they want to look at it. They didn't rule out immediately, though, these things like the short-term capital gains tax cut, which they didn't go along with when Governor Baker proposed it. It'll be interesting to see if they are more amenable to it in any way now that it's a Democrat suggesting the same thing.
Well, that's not always the way things have worked on Beacon Hill in the past. Evan, at the center, you've been looking at many of these proposals for a while. In a report you issued last June, you defined the challenge as, quote, assembling a tax cut package that benefits the most vulnerable, improves our state's competitiveness, and avoids unintended long-term consequences, end quote. Does this plan meet those tests?
Parts of it do meet that test, parts don't. It varies a lot. I think really the heart of it, as you've said, is the child independent tax credit. This is, you don't even think of it as a tax credit. This is just money that will go to every family that has kids and dependents in the state, and it will go every year regardless of what they owe in taxes. And it might be controversial simply because it's extremely generous. So this would be a major change, I think, that will help hundreds of thousands of families. That's a big deal. And so I think that lives up to the promise of helping those who need it.
And we should point out here that we saw something similar happen during the pandemic at the federal level.
Correct.
And we also saw a dramatic drop in
child poverty. Yeah, all across the country has proved extremely effective because it is really just giving people money. Not all of these tax credits work like this. Some of them you have to owe taxes in order to get some back. It gets complicated. That one's very simple. We just give people checks. The competitiveness side, I think, a little less convincing.
Well, tell you what, let's take a listen right now to a comment that Governor Healey made on that subject of competitiveness at a press conference earlier today.
We have to acknowledge that there are some aspects of our current tax system that make Massachusetts an outlier. When we don't keep up with other states, you see, we put our own competitiveness at risk.
Well, Katie, let me bring you back in here. We've heard this. I mean, I'm old enough. I know it's hard to believe, given my youthful countenance here. But I remember the days when Massachusetts was referred to as Taxachusetts. And in fact, businesses and individuals were fleeing the state at a prolific rate. That's when the notion of maintaining our competitiveness became almost kind of a third rail or a staple of Massachusetts politics. Is this still such a persuasive argument, as best you can tell?
I mean, whether or not it's persuasive, I guess we'll see that play out, right? The governor is using the number of other states as part of her argument here. So on short-term capital gains, we're one of 2 states that has a higher rate than long-term. On the estate tax, that's been something that members of all political parties have been talking about for years as something that discourages people from staying in Massachusetts when they could be moving to places like Florida, places like New Hampshire. Those tend to be the 2 that are bandied about. And that has been a competitiveness argument that keeps coming up. I guess you could say it hasn't been persuasive so far, right? Or at least not persuasive enough for the Democrats in the legislature to overcome their own differences of opinion about the best way to handle the estate tax.
Yeah, and Evan, as Katie pointed out before, what happens when you talk about capital gains cuts is the left says, oh, that's just a benefit for the rich.
Because it is.
And the right.
I'm very sensitive to concerns about competitiveness. I think we do have to worry about state competitiveness, and that's, I think, why you want to make the maximally effective tax changes to make the state economy more competitive, and these aren't those. I mean, I think that's the problem. It's not that the idea that we need to be more competitive is misguided, or the idea that we need to make changes in order to improve our competitiveness. That's all real, but economic policy is not strongly connected to our short-term capital gains rate. That's for day traders and house flippers, and this is people who make an investment, turn around and undo the investment very quickly. Whereas what you really want for economic competitiveness is long-term investments. And, well, so you should have a higher tax on short-term. So this, in some ways, going the wrong way. And the estate tax also, I mean, it's true that some people will move out of state to avoid paying the estate tax. But those people tend to be retirees. They're older people who are thinking about what's going to happen to them and their estates when they die. Those tend not to be the kind of people who are running businesses, hiring people, so it doesn't really touch the economy. There are things that do, and there are other kinds of tax changes that you would want to implement if you really care passionately about the competitiveness of the state. These aren't really the areas we would make changes.
Well, when a similar tax package was floated last year by then Governor Baker, the objections to it, House Speaker Mariano in particular touched on this, included the claim that, hey, we're flush with federal cash right now, our economy is doing pretty well right now, but history shows us that's not necessarily going to last. There are already signs of some economic softening. Do you see, Evan, this becoming a major factor in this debate as they hash this out? Yeah,
and I think this package is probably a little bit too big to be sustainable in the long term, judging from our own projections for long-term tax revenues. This is a very big package.
Right, but this is the opening ante, right? It's designed to have some cuts made in it, right?
Maybe, or the legislature might want to add its own priorities. I mean, you don't know how this is going to go, right? The House has its own set of tax priorities. The Senate had things that are not included in here. And I think we're starting off at a level that's probably a little bit too big and does need to get pared back. So I think that will be part of the challenge. A lot hinges on when exactly tax revenues start to come in short. We have been flush now for a couple of years, but that is changing. And whether it's this April or this June or September, we're going to start to see a real paring back in incoming tax revenues. And that's going to change what seems possible on Beacon Hill. So if it happens in April, yes, it will affect this discussion very dramatically and concretely. But it might not happen until June, it may not happen until September, it might not happen until December, in which case we might get to a point this fiscal year where this package passes before we recognize the constraints that are coming.
Yeah, Katie, we were texting back and forth before this interview about the time frame on all this. People need to understand, I think, that this is not something that's got to be voted on in connection with the budget in this summer. This is a separate entity that could be taken up and voted on at any point or not. Do you feel any sense of urgency on Beacon Hill with regard to this?
Well, there's not a sense of urgency for much on Beacon Hill right now because the session is still getting up and running. We're not really at the make it or break it deadline moments yet, which is when we tend to see a lot of action. But like Governor Baker did, Governor Healy is proposing her tax plan as a bill alongside her budget. She's putting the money in her budget, which will be filed Wednesday, to fund it. And, you know, with Governor Baker, we saw his tax plan taken up, you know, rewritten by the legislature and hit the floor in the House and the Senate for votes last July. It never got over the finish line. You know, in a 2-year session, which we're just starting on, you tend to see the action come in that second year. But Senate President Karen Spilka has started the year by calling for progressive tax reform to be passed soon. So I think she seems to have an interest in getting it done. Tax bills do have to start in the House, so it'll be up to them to decide.
Evan, first big policy initiative from a new governor, all Democratic legislature. Do you suspect that they'll want to move on this, or do you hope that they won't, or that they'll take their time?
I don't think there is a lot of time here, and I think there's a reason that even though it is a separate thing, it got filed alongside the budget, or the same week as the budget, basically, that the hope is that they're on the same time frame. And my own sense is that either this advances alongside the budget or it won't advance. So that there really is a kind of clock ticking here through to the end of this year rather than the end of the session. I could be wrong about that, but that's my sense for how people are thinking about it and the most likely path.
Wow, interesting point. We'll be watching. Evan Horowitz, Katie Lannon, thank you both very much for the insight. Really appreciate it.
Great to be here.